All right, welcome to the Explainer. If you're here, you're probably getting ready for your PCI Level 1 or Level 2 certification, and you know tensioning is a huge topic on that exam. Well, you've come to the right place. We're going to break down the essential rules and numbers you absolutely need to know to master it. So, are you ready to really nail this down? Our goal here is simple. To make the core rules of tensioning so clear, so straightforward, that you can walk into that exam with total confidence. Let's do it. Here's how we're going to tackle this. We've got 4 key areas. First, we'll cover the 3 golden rules of tensioning tolerances. Then we'll get into the gauging systems you'll be using. After that, we'll talk troubleshooting, what to do when wires fail. And finally, we'll wrap up with the all-important rules for calibration and records. Let's jump in. Okay, Section 1, the golden rules. Let's start with the absolute fundamentals. For any quality control inspector, these aren't just suggestions or guidelines, they are the law. These are the standards you have to enforce day in and day out. Every single time you tension a strand, it comes down to these 3 critical checks. It's a simple process, really. You check the force, you check the elongation, the stretch, and then you check how those 2 numbers relate to each other. Simple, right? But the devil is in the details, and that's what the exam is all about. Here's the first number you need to burn into your brain, plus or minus 5%. The force you see on that gauge has to be within 5% of your target calculated force. No wiggle room here. It's a tight tolerance, and it is your very first check. And guess what? Rule number 2 uses that very same number. The actual measured stretch of the strand, the elongation, also has to be within plus or minus 5% of your calculation. Easy to remember, right? 5% for force, 5% for elongation. But here's the catch. Passing those 2 checks individually isn't enough. There's a third rule that ties it all together. This is the one. This is rule number 3, the 5 percentage point rule. And honestly, this is where a lot of people get tripped up. It just means that the spread between your force error and your elongation error can't be more than 5 points. It's how we make sure both measurements are telling a consistent story. Let me show you what I mean. Okay, looking at this side by side makes it way clearer. On the left, see how the force is a little high at plus 2%, and the elongation is a bit low at minus 3%. The total distance, or spread, between plus 2 and minus 3 is exactly 5 points, so you're good. You just barely passed. But now look at the right. The force is 3% high, the elongation is 4% low. That's a spread of 7 points, and that is a failure. This is a perfect example of how you can pass the first 2 rules, but still fail the whole operation. Okay, so we've got the rules down pat. Now, in Section 2, let's talk about the tools of the trade. Because knowing all those tolerances doesn't mean a thing if the gauge you're using isn't accurate to begin with. And yep, you guessed it, there's a number for this too. Here's your next key figure for the exam. The equipment itself, the whole system, has its own tolerance. It has to be accurate to within 2% of the actual force. Now, here's a really practical point straight from the manual that catches people on the job. Gauges are most accurate right in the middle of their range. If you try to use a massive gauge to measure a tiny force, you're just not going to get an accurate reading. That's why you need to operate in that middle 80% sweet spot, unless your calibration report specifically says it's accurate outside that range. This is so important, and it's a classic exam question. You don't just calibrate the gauge by itself. You calibrate the entire system as one unit. We're talking the gauge, the jack, the pump, the hoses, all of it, tested and certified together exactly as you'll use it in the field. So how often does this calibration need to happen? The standard is, at a minimum, every 12 months. You also have to do it anytime you get funky, erratic results or after any major repairs. So remember that 12-month cycle for your exam. Let's move on to Section 3, troubleshooting. What happens when things don't go perfectly? Because let's face it, wires break. And you need to know instantly the rule for when a strand is still acceptable versus when it absolutely has to be replaced. This is crucial on the job, and you can bet it'll be on the exam. So the general rule of thumb here is the 2% rule. Usually, you can accept a tendon with some broken wires, as long as the total area of those broken wires is less than 2% of the total steel area. But, and this is a big but, this rule doesn't always apply. There are some critical exceptions you have to know by heart.
Okay, pay close attention because these are the deal breakers. These are your automatic failures, no questions asked. If even a single wire breaks in a 3-wire strand, it's done. Replace it. If 2 wires break in a 7-wire strand, same thing. Replace it. And absolutely any contact from welding, even a tiny fleck of spatter, means immediate rejection. These exceptions always override that 2% rule.
All right, let's bring it all home with our final section, the proof. You've done the work, you've checked the tolerances, but without the proper documentation from a QC perspective, it might as well have never happened. I can't stress this enough. Let it sink in. Your paperwork is your proof. Those calibration records are the official legal evidence that your equipment was giving you accurate numbers. Without them, you've got nothing to stand on.
So, what exactly needs to be in that record? For your exam, just know this checklist. You need the date, who did the calibration, the method they used, the range it was calibrated for, and this is key, a chart or a graph that plots the gauge reading against the actual force.
All right, I know we've thrown a lot of numbers at you, so here they are, all in one place. This is your study guide, your cheat sheet. You've got the plus or minus 5% for force and elongation, the 5 percentage point spread, the 2% gauge accuracy, the 2% wire failure rule, and that 12-month calibration cycle. If you know these cold, you are going to be in fantastic shape for the tensioning part of your exam. So we'll end with this thought. These numbers and rules, they aren't just about passing a test. They're the foundation of the quality control that ensures the safety and integrity of every single structure we build with pre-stressed concrete. The real test? Well, that starts on the job. Good luck with your certification. You've got this.